it's important for us as elected leaders in our city to come together to put aside our personal grievances and our personal disagreements in terms of governance style to really roll up our sleeves and get to work.
And you're hearing right there from Seattle City Council President Lorena Gonzalez as she and the City Council try to craft a budget that will not be vetoed by Mayor Jenny Durkan. A lot of developments here to cover, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Seattle News, Views, and Brews, the podcast that climbs every mountain, forwards every stream, and provides insight on Seattle area politics. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm also a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own. Joining me, the man who tries to limit himself to 5 servings of City Council hearings every day, it's Kevin Schofield from Seattle City Council Insight. Hello, Kevin.
Hey, I'm out there fording the rivers. I got my hip boots on, special City Council hip boots.
I'm ready. We're ready to go. We got a lot to wade. We got a lot to wade through here, my man. Our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast is City Grind Espresso from the first floor of City Hall. They are closed, of course, during the pandemic, but thanks a lot, John and Charlie, for your support. We are on episode 40 of the podcast this week. Want to keep this thing going, so we need your support on Patreon. Thanks to our new patron, Catherine, just signed on. Now, everyone, why can't you be like your sister, Catherine? We are here every week. We've also got some patrons-only content, too, so chip in what you can, and thank you very much. Thanks also to Converge Media for airing the video version of this podcast. Let's get started with right here, right now. Okay, Kevin, we're going to jump on budget issues in just a second here, but a flurry of ordinances facing the City Council in this first full week of October. Most of them kind of check-done updates for Seattle City Light, SPU, SDOT there, but a little bit of disagreement over this land use issue with regard to extending the period for which the council would have virtual meetings and thus allow for more exemptions of the design review process. Now, this was a split vote over this back in April when this first came up. Now the council is voting to extend these exemptions into October and past that. Kevin, I know Councilmember Peterson, the chair of the Land Use Committee, has pushed back on this. Can we talk about some of the back and forth on this one?
Yeah, so there are a lot of city departments and the City Council, of course, who have just sort of moved the regular meeting schedule virtually.
Right.
This is a case where the City Council at the SDCI's request made a change where not only did they say that a bunch of these things could be done virtually, but they basically moved a lot of things that prior to this and in normal times were required to be covered by the design review board into things that could just be handled administratively by the city department.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So it
SDCI
didn't need to go
construction inspections.
It didn't need to go through this public review process, right? So you go a little faster, but then the tension there is, well, the design review process was set up for a purpose, which is to create some sunlight and create kind of neighborhood and public
input of some sort,
review and input and accountability for the things that are getting approved.
Right.
There have been lots of accusations over the years that design review boards like this basically tend to slow down a lot of a lot of progress that needs to happen.
Developers would certainly say that.
Super conservative. They you end up with a lot of very similar looking housing, so they reduce diversity of buildings. They often reduce the size of a structure, like apartment complexes and things like that. And they end up being very conservative in reinforcing existing zoning and single family housing and all that stuff. And Peterson is an interesting place because his district is District 4 has been, one of the more vocal groups in the past of defending, neighborhood involvement and neighborhood decision making around the comprehensive plan and zoning.
Wallingford's certainly not happy about
design review approvals. So, he, and that doesn't mean everybody in the district feels that way, but a lot of people do. So, he, in this case, has said, well, look, at this point, we, enough of these virtual meetings and Zoom and everything are working. Can't we just sort of do these things virtually? Yeah, clearly we can't do them in person right now.
Right.
Design board meetings can't be in person. But do we really have to go? Do we still have to move off this stuff? A lot of the stuff off the design review boards, and into administrative, reviews instead, or can we just do the regular process we normally would, but just virtually?
I think that's going to be a big issue coming up here because so many different projects are coming online. Affordable housing certainly a piece of this. I know that's part of the jump back here. I'm going to see what's going to happen with that one as the months go on here. I know a lot more neighborhoods are going to be talking about it, but I really do want to jump on the budget here, Kevin, because everybody's talking about it. The council went through its briefings last week. This week, a public hearing on October 6th. The council decides by October 8th which issues really hit that first cutoff there. We're going to get to the police part in just a minute, folks, but I want to talk about what the mayor is proposing when it comes to funding community-based safety programs. So in the rebalanced 2020 budget from the council that the mayor vetoed, the council called for $14 million for this. They're not going to get all that. Now, this is separate, as I understand it, from the $100 million that the mayor's calling for BIPOC communities. We'll hold off that for a minute. But I want to talk about this $14 million that the council was asking for. The council's not going to get all that they wanted there, Kevin. There's some back and forth going on with the mayor right now.
The council isn't going to get all of that in 2020. Right. And largely, the mayor sent a new letter. The mayor vetoed it. The council overrode it, and the mayor came back with a letter a couple of days ago, or late last week, saying, I see you vetoed this. I understand that you want $14 million, but realistically, one of the rules in city government is that any contract that is more than $53,000 has to be bid out. So there has to be bidding. There has to be an RFP that goes out and a bidding process for this.
Request
right?
for
And that
proposal.
takes time.
Yep.
Right. So, and we're already in October. So by the time that runs out, they're just not going to have enough time to spend $14 million. So the mayor said, yeah, I can spend about $4 of that this year and do that by basically expanding contracts with a number of providers that the city already has contracts with. Right?
Yeah.
We don't need to bid that out. We can just add more money into those.
Yeah.
But for the rest of it, that really needs to get bid out. We can start that bidding process now.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to award that money this year in any reasonable way. Yeah. So council, you should figure out how you're going to do that in the 2021 budget. I haven't put any money in that. Right. But you guys can go figure that out if you think it's really important. Well,
and I guess we're seeing some light here when it comes to the council and the mayor finally agreeing on something here. But I wanted to work on this other piece here, this $100 million that the mayor's calling for BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color. Some good reporting coming in from Erica C. Barnett on this issue. The mayor, who also vetoed the Jumpstart plan on big business payroll taxes from the council back a few months ago, is now talking about using at least part of those taxes for this $100 million effort she's trying to cobble together. What do you make of this, Kevin, what the mayor is trying to do with this?
Well, okay. So, the Jumpstart payroll tax is now, assuming it's legal and goes forward.
Right. That's a big assumption. Right.
Is now one of really 5 big sources that together are about 80% of all the general fund revenues for the city.
Got it.
The general fund, which is this big pot of money that has almost no restrictions on how the council can spend the money. So that's where they focus their energy because they actually get to make decisions on things.
Right.
Altogether, it's about $1.5 billion.
Yes.
So Jumpstart is about $200 million of that. And again, it's general fund. It's not earmarked for specific things. The council passed a resolution. When they passed a Jumpstart thing saying, here's how we want to spend money.
Right. Green New Deal, all these different things.
They said $96 million on community investments and sustaining investments that are already in place.
Right.
$86 million on replenishing the 2 emergency funds. And then a little bit of money on some other things. Right. So here's the thing you can really critique the mayor on.
Okay.
the mayor in her budget did not put the $86 million back into replenishing the 2 emergency funds.
That's a big part of this. Yes.
Didn't do that. Right. Just dumped it all in general fund. Now, there's $1.3 billion other dollars in there, and there's no color to any of this money in there. So you can't really say the mayor took that, that $100 million for her new fund out of the Jumpstart tax, because they also cut $60-70 million of funding across the city government by cutting travel and other perks and things like that. It's like, well, why don't you say they took that money and
right.
It's it's all money in this big pot. Right?
Okay.
And
okay.
once it all gets mixed together, you can't really say it came specifically from this or came specifically
but
from
the fact that
right?
she's not reimbursing that emergency fund, I think that's a big piece of this.
That's where you can critique her. That's something that the city council said specifically. We want $86 million to go back into that.
Yeah.
And what the mayor has said in response is, hey, look, one of the reasons that the city council said they were going to do that is because they were drawing down those emergency funds so heavily in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Right? They left about $50 to $60 million
That's
in
true.
those emergency funds.
Mm-hmm.
And that is about what Durkin's budget spends on them. So,
mm-hmm.
so Durkin is absolutely, is finishing the job of completing, of completely depleting those two emergency funds.
Right.
But if her budget passes as is,
mm-hmm.
There would be $6 million left in those two funds.
Right.
So almost nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, more than I make in a week, but I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But so the mayor is saying, well, we didn't need to replenish them. The original strategy was they're going to get depleted in 2020, but we're still going to need that money in 2021. Yeah. So let's use a jumpstart tax to replenish them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't get depleted in 2020, the mayor is saying, hey, we didn't need to replenish them. So let's use the money for other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the city council, and it's just one more argument now.
Yeah. This is what they're going to be.
They're just trying to score points against each other on this one.
Yeah.
So of course the city council is saying, you're taking that jumpstart money and you're putting it in your $100 million program. Right. Which isn't really true.
Yeah.
And the mayor's office is, hand waving, no, we didn't. We followed, the city council's wishes, even though we didn't actually replenish those funds. Right.
Wow. Okay. A lot of good arguments over that one. I know you've been listening to a ton of them. How to sustain these kinds of investments, possible income tax. We're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff in this budget session.
Oh yeah, and the sustaining. I just say the sustaining is a big one. So So the mayor's got $100 million in her proposed 2021 budget, and. But that's one-time funds.
Yeah.
Right?
And she wants this going for 10 years. So yeah.
She wants to go on for 10 years. And so in a task force that she's setting up, it's going to get community input. Mm-hmm. She wants to ask the community for recommendations on how they should sustain it.
Sure. All right. Well, we'll hear what's next on that one. Let's move on to Now Hear This. All right, everyone, you've been very patient. Let's talk about Seattle Police and their budget. What is it going to look like to reimagine the SPD, as it's been said, move some functions out of the department? And is Police Chief Adrian Diaz on board? Well, it sounds like it, at least. Here's what the chief told the council at a budget committee meeting last week.
We will watch caseloads. We will watch response times. We will watch clearance rates. I hope this move alone makes it clear. I'm prepared to make changes. And when the need is clear, there is a plan for what to do next. We will commit to evaluate how that works.
Kevin, it appears at first glance there's some cooperation from the chief and the mayor on this very delicate issue of laying off 70 sworn officers from the SPD and doing those layoffs out of order. The council had asked to do this as a way to preserve the new diverse recruits the SPD has, and also as a way to lay off some officers on the force who have had some questions around their credibility, the so-called Brady list there. Kevin, what's next here on this? What are you hearing in terms of this, what appears to be cooperation between the mayor, the chief, and the council?
Yeah, I think the mayor's office is now seeing that it's inevitable that there's going to be layoffs, and so they just need to start that process. And the process is extremely complicated.
Yeah,
right? There is, there is a labor relations board on the executive side.
Yep.
There's a labor relations policy committee that has representatives from both the executive branch and the city council on it, and they're the ones at the end of the day who really oversee any kind of labor negotiations.
Right.
Both the two unions that represent police officers and police supervisors, like the sergeants and lieutenants, have both already notified the city that they demand to bargain any layoffs related to this, let alone whether they are out of order layoffs. Yeah. And that process will take months. If the city wants to do out of order layoffs, then they actually have to go petition this outside body, the Public Safety Civil Service Commission.
Thank you. You got it.
It's hard to keep track of all these acronyms.
A lot of acronyms.
PSCSC. The Public Safety Civil Service Commission is the body responsible for approving any out of order layoffs.
Yeah, right.
And this is something that's in the rules but has never been used.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So exactly in practice, can they do this or not? It's completely untested, right?
Yeah.
What are the limits for doing it? Can they say, yeah, we want to do out of order layoffs and lay off officers that have a large number of complaints, even though all those complaints have already gone through the discipline process?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, think about for you, if you had, somebody raised a complaint about you and your job 10 years ago.
It's not my fault.
Process,
yeah.
And you got fined for it or, disciplined in some way, and you dealt with that and you moved on and, you reformed your ways. And 9 years later, somebody says, yeah, we want to lay you off first because this thing that happened 10 years ago.
Right.
How would you feel about that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, and I know the other piece of this is, I think the mayor has signaled some support here, but is also saying we need to kind of have a better, more holistic kind of appraisal of what's going on here. And the chief, in talking to him, I did a couple of weeks ago, he said, I want to keep this department whole. So I'm seeing some signs that this might happen, but at the same time, the chief is trying to retain officers. He's losing people to lateral transfers, going to other departments around the area, and people that are resigning. I mean, this is a real deal. He's putting more people on patrol right now, and the SPD is hurting in some ways.
Yeah, and last week in committee hearings, Diaz told the city council quite bluntly, I need 1,400 officers.
Right.
I feel like that's the floor for the number of officers that I need in order to maintain public safety in the city. Yeah. And the city council was not really buying that argument. So that's going to continue to be a flashpoint in this fight.
Yes, it will. Also, I wanted to talk about these apparent cuts coming to the navigation team. Again, a situation where the mayor vetoed this idea from the council to start with, and now is apparently going along with it. But this is another bit of a legal quagmire here, Kevin.
Oh, there's so many messes here. There's legal messes here with a set of cases that sometimes get confused with each other. That one aspect of this is that the city of Seattle was sued over some homeless encampment removals, and the judge came back and actually found for the city in this and said because they go through this process, what they call the MDAR process.
Yes, right.
Multi-department administrative rules, a set of rules that the city adopted back in 2017 for when and how they can remove
That's right.
Homeless encampments.
Giving notice, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they'd written the MDAR rules and they, apparently follow the MDAR rules, it's all legal and above board. But that involves making sure that they are giving advance notice, that they're making referrals to shelter, and that they are storing homeless persons' belongings for later retrieval by them. Yeah. So, one of the things the mayor has said is, hey, look, if you dissolve the navigation team, they're the ones responsible for making sure that the city was really complying with the MDARs, right? So, without that, we could end up back in court. Yeah. Again. Wow. And that's maybe true. Maybe not true. But last week in committee hearings, last Friday, what the Durkan administration proposed in their budget is that while they've taken the 2020 cuts that the city council imposed on them, where they basically cut all the police positions in the navigation team, and they basically gutted the rest of the civilian staff by about half. Yeah, right. So they got about 6 positions left in what was the navigation team, about 16 people, and they moved them into a new organization. And what they're saying is that they're going to focus those folks, their priority is going to be around outreach. Yes. Right? And under some really hard questioning from the city council, they did admit that there may still be circumstances in which that group has to remove encampments, right? If there's an obstruction encampment that is completely blocking a sidewalk and outreach has not convinced a service-resistant person to, pick up and move to shelter, then they may actually have to go in and remove an encampment. Yeah. But removing encampments is not going to be their primary role. And again, the city council was deeply, deeply skeptical about how that's going to work in practice. So, there are more fights to be had in the coming weeks as the city council goes through its budget deliberations on that.
All right, thanks a lot for that breakdown, Kevin. Let's move on to what's next. We are not done with the SPD yet. Kevin, 2 new charges now facing Seattle police regarding officers' use of crowd control weapons. This from the end of September. I'm trying to figure out what this means. Kind of an update on some past cases, or what do we have here?
So we had 2 lawsuits against the city of Seattle by protesters or groups of protesters who complained about overly violent tactics and overuse of crowd control weapons and largely indiscriminate use of them with the crowds. And as SPD managed these protests, mostly peaceful protests, but occasionally there were bits of violence in them over the summer. And kind of late July, early August, Judge Richard Jones put updated an earlier restraining order that put some restrictions on the city's use of crowd control weapons, but didn't ban them altogether.
Right.
And so it got updated again in early August, and that's sort of been where everything has sat for a while with that. Well, now both of these, the plaintiffs in both of these lawsuits have come forward with new complaints about the
same more action going on.
Same four nights, one in late August, then Labor Day, then September 22nd, September 23rd, where they said that SPD basically violated the restraining order. And in their use of crowd control weapons, and asked the judge to find SPD in contempt of the restraining order and put some bigger restrictions on them.
Right.
And so that's basically where that stands right now. There are these new charges. There hasn't been a response yet from the city. They'll get a chance to respond, and then the judge may decide to hold a hearing or may just rule on it. And at this point, Judge Jones in the past has really wanted to see evidence from both sides. He's willing to take snippets of video from social media. From the scene and call and declare that that makes it clear what happened at those. He wants real investigations into these incidents. He wants the city and the SPD to have a chance to present their evidence as well before he rules. He's really trying to broadly look at this and do the right thing around it, understanding that there are some acts of violence by protesters or people, individuals who embed themselves into
within a protest,
and that SPD needs to have tools available to deal with that.
Right.
So where is he going to come down on these? I don't know. I think we'll have to see what evidence and what response SPD has on that.
That's right. And we've got a lot more on what the SPD's crowd control policies are going through right now with our patrons only discussion happening this week. Make sure you check that out. Kevin, we always like to wrap up the show, as you know, looking on the bright side, a little bit of baked goodness to go with the coffee break here. Kevin, I have in my hands a pumpkin snickerdoodle. Behold, if you will, one of my daughter's newest creations. Mouth-watering already. I'm more of a chocolate chip guy. That's just the way I roll, but I'm going to say it right here. Snickerdoodle, one of the most underrated cookies out there. Your thoughts?
I love snickerdoodles.
Yeah, what is it? The cream of tartar thing going on, or what's your secret ingredient there?
Snickerdoodles is not actually something I make very often. Maybe once or twice. But
so you're trying to say you're inspired right now?
Maybe. Yes, maybe I'll have some snickerdoodles next week. Right. My daughter, one of my daughters, when she was in grad school, decided that every week she was going to bring in, one day she's going to bring in a set of cookies, and she would never reuse a recipe.
Whoa.
So she went on for a few years there, coming up, finding a new recipe, and she dug deep to find cookie recipes. So she is really, the master of the cookies in my family. Right? I love making cookies. I'll do it from time to time, but she's the pro. I'm just an amateur.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's what I say about my daughters, too. They know a lot more about what's going on than I do. Thanks for that breakdown, Kevin, and thanks, as always, for joining me.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody. Next time you want to know what's going on with local politics, make sure you give us a listen right here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews and find out what's brewing. You can, of course, subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. Please support us on Patreon if you like what you're hearing. And thank you so much for listening. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media, too. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2020.